After I made a simple comment about parenting, my daughter-in-law unplugged my oxygen machine during the night by accident. My son called it a misunderstanding, but I had already sent the footage to someone who knew exactly what to do with it. I'm a 73-year-old woman with COPD. I've lived a full life, hard but honest. I worked as a nurse for nearly 4 decades in Boise, Idaho. Raised my son on my own after my husband died in an accident when Paul was only 7. I gave him everything I had, and when I couldn't give more, I still found a way. 3 years ago, after my health declined, Paul invited me to move in with him and his wife, Natalie.
I didn't want to.
I had pride, but the cost of care, the hospital bills, the breathing equipment, it was too much. I sold my condo and moved into their guest room. I gave them most of what I had from the sale. I didn't ask for anything free. I paid them $1,200 a month, cooked when I could, helped with the laundry, and kept to myself. Natalie never liked me. That was obvious from the beginning. But I didn't expect warmth. Just basic decency. Instead, she made it clear I wasn't welcome. She wouldn't speak to me directly. She talked around me. If I was in the kitchen, she left. If I made dinner, she didn't eat. I kept telling myself, just stay out of her way. But it didn't matter. Every time Paul wasn't around, she'd find small ways to remind me I was unwanted. Once, she accidentally threw away my medications while reorganizing the pantry. Another time, she said she was too busy to drive me to the doctor and I missed my appointment. I started noticing that my oxygen hose would be tangled or moved from where I left it. Paul always had an excuse.
She didn't mean it like that.
You're overthinking it. It's just a lot with the baby on the way. When the baby came, things got worse. I wasn't allowed to hold him unless Paul was home. She told me it was because I was weak and might drop him. I never had any incidents, never even stumbled near the baby. But she acted like I was contagious. She wouldn't even let me sit in the same room while she fed him. One day, the baby was crying nonstop. I was in the living room and Natalie was pacing, clearly frustrated. She snapped, "What the hell do you want now?" at the baby. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I just said, "Sometimes babies cry. Maybe he just needs a quiet moment." She looked at me like I'd spit on her.
Didn't say anything.
Just stared. That night, I did my usual routine. Checked my oxygen machine. Everything looked fine.
Plugged in. Secure.
I went to bed at 9:15 p.m. Around 2 a.m., I woke up in a cold sweat. My chest felt like it was collapsing. I reached for the hose. No air. I looked at the machine. The light was off. I panicked. Rolled out of bed. Crawled on my hands and knees, feeling around in the dark. My fingers finally found the cord, unplugged from the wall. Not loose. Not tripped. Fully unplugged. I plugged it back in and gasped so hard when the air started flowing that I nearly blacked out. I laid there, coughing and crying, for over an hour. The next morning, I asked her calmly if she had unplugged the machine. She said, "Oh God, yeah, I think I vacuumed in there yesterday and must have forgotten to plug it back in." Sorry, there was no vacuum. It hadn't moved from the hall closet, and she hadn't vacuumed that day or the day before. I knew that. I keep track of every little thing now because it's the only control I have left. Paul just stood there while she gave that excuse. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He said, "Let's not make this into something it's not." But I already had something they didn't know about. My cousin in Coeur d'Alene had sent me a cheap security cam after I'd had a fall last year. I set it up pointing at my bedroom door and plugged it in behind the dresser. Just in case. I checked the footage after they left the house that day. 1:46 a.m. Natalie walks in, fully awake, no vacuum. Looks right at me. I was dead asleep. She moves around the corner, bends down, reaches behind the dresser, and unplugs the cord. Then leaves. I didn't show Paul. I didn't confront her. I forwarded the footage to my cousin. She's not just family. She's retired law enforcement, nearly 30 years with the Kootenai County Sheriff's Office.
She knows what she's doing.
And when I sent her that file, her only reply was, "You did the right thing. I'll handle it." That was 5 days ago. I haven't said a word to either of them, but I can feel something coming. Natalie still walks around like she owns the place, like I'm just an old dog waiting to die. Paul's getting quieter. I think he senses something's changed. I'm not scared anymore. I know I was almost killed. I know it wasn't a mistake. And I know Natalie has no idea what's coming for her. After I sent the footage to my cousin, I waited. Every minute in that house felt heavier. Natalie kept acting like nothing happened, but I saw it in her eyes. She looked at me differently. Not scared. Just annoyed. Like I was taking too long to go. 3 days after I sent the video, my cousin called. She said, "I've passed this on to someone I trust. It's in motion. Don't confront her. Don't say a word." That night, I heard them arguing in the kitchen. Paul, why the hell would she be recording in her bedroom? Natalie, because she's paranoid. That woman's not right. Paul, well, now I have to explain to CPS why there's a claim that you endangered her life with our baby in the house. I froze.
CPS.
My cousin had reached out to an old friend who still worked in Family Protective Services. Apparently, if an elderly person is being abused in a home with an infant, it flags concern for the child's safety too. And now the system was involved. They didn't know I had heard everything. I stayed in my room, quiet.
But the tension changed.
Natalie went cold, ice cold. She stopped pretending. She'd leave spoiled milk in the fridge, then blame me for not smelling it. She told Paul the first wandered around at night and might have dementia. I never left my room at night. I barely left during the day. 2 weeks later, a social worker came by. A wellness check. I answered every question clearly. I showed her my logs, medications, blood oxygen readings, photos of where things had been moved. I played polite and confused. I just think maybe she's stressed. Being a mom is hard.
I wasn't about to say the wrong thing,
but I made sure she saw everything she needed to. Natalie was livid. The second the door closed, she banged on my wall and shouted, "You think you're clever? You're playing a game you can't win." That night, the lock on my bedroom door, an old, weak push lock, was mysteriously broken. Paul said it was just worn out. I knew better. I moved my dresser in front of the door every night after that. I barely slept. Paul started avoiding me completely. He never checked in, never asked how I was feeling. It was like I had already died, and they were just waiting for the paperwork. What broke me was when I overheard Natalie on the phone, whispering to someone, "If we get her into a home, we won't have to deal with this anymore.
She's not even family.
She's just a liability." Not even family. I raised that boy alone after his father died. I worked nights. I sold my wedding ring to pay for his braces. I skipped meals so he could have lunch money. And now I was just a liability. I didn't cry after that. I didn't speak much either. But I called my cousin and told her one thing. Next time they cross the line, I want everything. The police. The press. I want them to feel what I felt crawling across that floor, begging for air. She said, "Then get ready. I think it's coming." 2 nights later, something changed. I woke up to my oxygen machine still running, but my nightstand drawer was open. I always close it. Inside was my pill organizer. Except the compartments were all mixed up. Pills were missing, and some weren't mine. I found what looked like crushed melatonin in the Monday slot. I hadn't used melatonin in over a year. I felt sick to my stomach. Not because of what I found, but because I realized she was trying to set me up. Natalie was trying to make it look like I was confused, possibly even drugged or unstable. If I ended up in a hospital, they could say it was dementia or memory loss, maybe even overdose. That'd be enough to justify moving me into a home or getting medical power of attorney. I knew I had to act fast. I called my cousin again. She came down from Coeur d'Alene the next day, unannounced. She knocked on the door in uniform, even though she was retired. Said she just wanted to visit her auntie. Natalie's face went white. My cousin walked into my room and pulled out a folder. Inside were printed stills from the footage, a log of the Unplugged machine, a timeline of events. She'd been quietly building a case. "I'm filing an emergency report today," she whispered to me while Natalie and Paul waited in the kitchen. "They'll be here by the end of the week. You'll need to act normal until then." I nodded. But that night, Natalie went too far. She made dinner, something she never did for me. A bland soup with crackers. I didn't eat it, not because I was suspicious, but because my gut told me not to. I wrapped it in foil and hid it in a Ziploc under my bed. The next morning, I called my cousin and asked her to have the soup tested. 2 days later, the results came back. Sleep medication, enough to knock out a healthy adult for 10 to 12 hours. I told my cousin I wanted the police involved now. What I didn't expect was that Natalie would preempt us. She called Adult Protective Services before we could file and claimed I had become paranoid and violent. She said I had accused her of poisoning me, that I was hiding things, and that she was scared for the baby's safety. Suddenly, I was the investigation target. An APS worker showed up with a county deputy. They asked to search my room. I was ready. I handed them a USB drive with all the footage. I gave them my medication logs, a recording of Natalie's threat through the wall, and even the test result on the soup, signed by the lab. They sat in my room for almost 2 hours reviewing everything. Then the deputy stood up and said quietly, "We'll handle it from here." Natalie didn't see it coming when they arrested her 3 days later. She was coming back from the grocery store. They didn't cuff her in front of the baby, but they didn't ask her either. They took her in on charges of elder abuse, reckless endangerment, and tampering with prescription medication. Paul tried to deny everything. She wouldn't do that. My wife wouldn't do that. But then they showed him the footage. All of it. He looked like he aged 10 years in a second. I still wasn't done.
Not yet.
Because Natalie had filed for legal guardianship behind my back a week earlier. She wanted control over my finances, my medications, everything. And I had proof. And I was about to use it. After Natalie was arrested, Paul didn't speak to me for 2 days. He was still in the house, taking care of the baby, but the silence was loud. He couldn't even look at me. He'd go from the nursery to the kitchen without saying a word. I stayed in my room, watching the clock, breathing slow through the machine that nearly became my death sentence. On the 3rd day, he finally knocked on my door. "I didn't know," he said. "I swear to God, I didn't know." He looked broken. His eyes were red. His hands were shaking. I didn't answer him. Not out of anger, but because I didn't believe that anymore. If he didn't know, it was because he didn't want to. If he didn't see, it was because looking meant doing something. And he didn't want that responsibility. "She told me you were sick. She said you were forgetting things." I stayed silent. "She said you left the stove on. That you accused her of stealing your medication." More silence. He looked at me like he was waiting for forgiveness. Like one conversation could undo years of turning his head. But I didn't have anything left to give. "She filed for guardianship behind my back, too," he finally said. "Tried to get full control over your money. My name wasn't even on the paperwork." That made me look up. I asked, "When did you find out?" He swallowed hard. "Last week. Before the arrest." I confronted her. She said it was just precautionary. I didn't think he stopped himself. He had thought. He just hadn't done anything. "I've started the process to drop it," he said. "The court hasn't reviewed it yet, so if you contest." "I already did," I said. "With a lawyer." He looked stunned. "You hired a lawyer?"
I didn't respond.
I turned my eyes back to the window. He left my room and didn't come back the rest of the day.
But something else happened that night.
Something I didn't expect. Natalie's sister showed up, unannounced. I could hear her voice in the kitchen, loud, angry. "You had Mom convinced she was going crazy," she shouted. "You told everyone she was unstable, just like you're saying about her now. Maybe you belong in jail." I listened from behind my closed door as the family started crumbling under its own lies. Apparently, this wasn't the first time Natalie had tried something like this. 3 years ago, she'd moved her own mother into their garage in California after a fall. Not a proper room, a garage. Claimed it was temporary. But according to her sister, she started siphoning off her mother's social security and filing prescriptions in her name. When their mom died, it got swept under the rug. No one questioned a thing. But now the pattern was clear. Natalie had done this before. She knew exactly how to isolate, manipulate, and take control. And she almost got away with it again. Only this time I had lived. And I had one more move to make, one that would reach far beyond just her jail cell. Because everything she tried to take from me, my breath, my mind, my freedom, was going to cost her everything. The day after Natalie's sister showed up, my lawyer called. He said, "We're clear to file everything now. We're going for full prosecution and civil." That's when it all fell into place. Natalie wasn't just being charged with elder abuse. With the added evidence, tampering with medication, the history with her mother, the attempted legal guardianship without consent, it escalated. Financial fraud, endangerment of a dependent adult. Even attempted manslaughter was on the table if we pushed it. Paul tried to stop it. He came into my room with a folder full of bills, saying he could make things right, that he'd put the house in my name, that he'd do whatever it took to make this go away quietly. But that's the thing about real betrayal. It doesn't get to be quiet. I told him he could keep the house. I didn't want it. I didn't want a single piece of their life. What I did want was in motion already. My lawyer filed the civil suit the next morning, targeting Natalie and Paul. Not for physical abuse, but for negligence. For failing to report signs of danger. For financial exploitation. And with the evidence we had, especially showing how long he ignored my condition while taking money from me every month, it held. He fought it, but the court agreed. Paul was forced to pay restitution, everything I'd paid them since I moved in, plus damages. My lawyer pushed for garnished wages when he didn't have the cash. The judge granted it. Natalie stayed in jail until trial. She took a plea deal to avoid a longer sentence, but she still got 2 years in prison and 3 years probation after that. She also lost any right to guardianship or control over vulnerable adults, ever again. Her name's in the system now, flagged for life. But the final piece came from the media. My cousin had quietly tipped off a journalist she trusted. The story ran under the headline, "Boise woman survives oxygen sabotage in alleged elder abuse case. Family faces charges." It spread. Local news picked it up. Then it hit some national sites. Reddit got a hold of it. The screenshots of the footage, the audio clips, even the test results from the soup, people were furious. The public turned. The comments were relentless. Natalie's name was out there now. Not just in court records, but burned into the internet forever. I moved out the day after her sentencing. Packed what little I had, and my cousin drove me back to Coeur d'Alene. Paul tried to call. Left a voicemail that said, "I never meant for any of this. I was scared." I deleted it. He was scared. I was the one on the floor choking in the dark while the woman he shared a bed with tried to end my life. I'm safe now. I've got a small apartment near the lake. I've got my oxygen, my own keys, and a lock that actually works. Sometimes I wonder what kind of man my son became. Sometimes I cry for the child he used to be. But I don't miss him. I miss the illusion I had of him. The boy I thought I raised. As for Natalie, her record will follow her forever. She lost her teaching license, too. Turns out she'd been working part-time online for a school district and didn't disclose her charges. They fired her immediately after the article dropped. The world finally saw her for who she really was. And me? I'm breathing just fine.